Welcome to the Wise and Happy Life podcast, where ancient wisdom meets modern science, and mindfulness, philosophy, and happiness practices blend with neuroscience, compassion, and common sense. Hosted by Bob Martin, meditation mentor, happiness coach, trial lawyer, and entrepreneur. This podcast explores how to live with grace, presence, and purpose in a complex world.
Hello, good people. This is Bob Martin at a Wise and Happy Life podcast. And I want to welcome you to our initial recording of a podcast. We're so excited today. And we have as a guest a wonderful person, a good friend. We go back a long way, and I'm so happy that she's here. She's a yoga instructor. She's a rock and roll singer. She's a Pilates instructor. She's a ballet person. And besides all of that, she's just good people. So Cricket Foster, say hi.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Oh,
I'm
it's a
excited to
pleasure. It's a pleasure.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to have you because we've worked together so many times, and it's like our minds really connect, and I love that.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing these days, and how you got here.
Oh gosh. Big story, lots of stories. Um, I currently live here in North Carolina. I've been here probably, I guess, about 20 years. I have traveled all over the world, basically dancing and singing. Um, And in the last probably 20 years, I've been doing a lot of yoga and Pilates and personal training and things like that. So it's been good. I'm excited to be able to share what I've gained through those years, and hopefully it'll help some people. So,
Well, you're not only just a yoga teacher and a Pilates teacher, but you also sing in a rock and roll band. And you know what comes to my mind immediately is that all of those things, I mean, singing, learning new music, understanding how to fit into a band, learning yoga, going through the hours and hours that it takes to teach and learn to teach and be certified to teach, and then
mm,
being certified. You know, what comes to mind is the word discipline.
yeah. Yeah. Well, the years of ballet were good for that. They taught me a lot about how to keep going and how to pick myself up when things didn't feel the best. And so the years of yoga have definitely helped with that. Um, I think that there's yoga is a practice. So when you're looking at what's going on in your life, and you know that you have something that you can fall back on, and I don't necessarily hate to use the word ritualistic, but in a sense it is. Um, but it gives you a sense of something that's familiar, which is fantastic. It's always good to have that sense of familiarity. And I think even with, being in the band, which is a wedding band. I mean, you call it a rock band, but I'm the rocker in the wedding band. So, we have a couple of soul singers in the band, and we play a good variety of music. But I would say I'm the rocker. I mean, if you can't tell by the gruffness in my voice, I'm definitely the rock and roll part of the band. But
Well, like that. Let's not be so humble. I've been to some of your shows, and you put on here in the city in Burlington, and gather crowds, and people from all over the county come with their little set up chairs and sit in the streets, and they
yeah,
fill up a whole block. So don't be so humble.
well, not to
Especially,
not
especially, I mean, some of the stuff you play, I go, but when you hit Foreigner and Journey, oh, you got me.
well, not to toot my own horn, but our next big public show has about 10,000 people. So so that'll be nice. That's fun. That's a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I love performing on the weekends. I mean, it's nice to be able to step away from my other jobs and perform on the weekends with my husband and the rest of the band, and it's a good time. We've been together now. The core group of us have been together almost 10 years. So that's a long
Wow.
time for a
Wow.
band to be together.
Yeah. So, I mean, even relationships, again, I get back to this idea of just, sticking with it and having discipline. And, um, Yeah, so that's something that so many of us. Well, let me ask you this question: do you think that if you learn to do something and stick with it, that it carries over and affects your ability to do that in other aspects?
Sure.
Like, the,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
so
there's
what
no
was the first? Yeah, what was the first thing that you were disciplined about? What was the first thing that you stuck with it and learned to do?
well, I say probably ballet, because ballet was really
Hmm.
in my heart. And I was a I was a decent ballerina in high school, but I really got dedicated to it after high school. And the company that I was with had a fabulous director, and I was is semi-pro, which means sometimes we got paid and sometimes we didn't, but we did it for the love of it, really.
Uh-huh,
um,
uh-huh.
and you know, I look back on it now and I think I could have been great as a ballerina, but I had other aspirations at the time too because I was doing some musical theater and I was personal training, and so I didn't really throw myself all the way into it. So, you know, I think that if I had, there's a good chance I could have been a principal, but I was in the corps and I just loved it. But we were dedicated to it, don't get me wrong. We practiced 5 days a week. So and it was long hours. So, you know, I think you're right. I think it does translate into other aspects of your life to have some kind of discipline. I saw a video recently, was a Marine Corps officer who had said, "You don't like going to the gym." He said, show up today and do 5 minutes. He said, the fact that you showed up means something. And he said, and then show up tomorrow and you might do 10 minutes tomorrow. He said, but you showed up. And he said, keep showing up because that's one of the biggest parts about it is to keep showing up. And even on the days that I don't feel like doing yoga, which there are a few here and there, as long as I continue to do it, I always feel better when I'm done. So, I mean, I
It,
think that's
it's
helpful.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's a true thing about human beings. For some crazy reason, we hesitate to go do something that we know is going to make us feel better, and we feel better after we do it. And I just wonder, what is that,
Yeah.
you know,
What keeps
that
us
once it
from
gets
showing?
our way,
Right. What
what
keeps
keeps
us
us
from
from
showing up? That's it. Yeah. And it's funny things like we love to go and get a good massage, right? Some people don't, but a lot of people do. And I said to yourself, you have your own hands. Why are you not giving yourself a massage frequently? It's one of those things that I encourage my students to do in the yoga classes. That hamstring is tight. Why don't you give it a rub? And usually they'll just grab a strap and they'll just pull it and they'll just try to stretch it. And I'm like, your hands are there too. A massage is great, but you have hands too. So give your leg a rub, and it's definitely helpful, I think, and in a lot of different aspects of your life, just being able to say, what other facilities do I have to make things better?
Hmm.
Um,
And touch. I think what you're pointing to there is touch. We're mammals, and that is so intrinsic, to us. What's the first thing that a baby does is, touch the mother, and the
right.
mother touches the child, and there's this connection of physical touch. And sometimes we don't recognize that, even, holding our heart
Mhm.
or stroking your arm when things are
Right.
bad,
Yeah.
simulates that kind of mammalian loving response.
Yeah.
Um,
There's no doubt.
you know,
One of the things we talk about in the yoga teacher training, because I train yoga teachers as well, is that there are some people that come into your class that are never touched. They don't have a physical connection with anybody. And so we go through a process of what we call hands on adjustments. And you have to know that sometimes, and I hate to use the word triggered, but some people are triggered because they're not used to it. And so I'm a hugger. I like to hug people. And so I think that it's super important to continue to foster that sense of being connected to other people. I think that it's really important to reach out and say, "Hey, I'm here," and put your hand on somebody's shoulder, and give them that sense of security, because there is a level of security that comes from being touched. And it also, of course, there's the whole thing about if you hug heart to heart for 7 seconds. Yeah. So that's one of the things that we talk about, is that you're not really getting a really good heart hug unless you're heart to heart for 7 seconds. And I mean, when you've had a good hug,
Right, right.
you
Yeah,
know,
there are those folks that are the shoulder huggers. You
right?
go to hug them and they give you their shoulder.
Yeah, no
And
doubt. I
but no, it's true. The heart to hearts, that I mean, a 7-second hug actually stimulates the release of oxytocin, which is
Right,
the same hormone that stimulated it at birth.
right.
That creates that bonding sensation,
Mhm.
between mother and child. So it is a truly mind body connection.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And reduces the cortisol levels too, which is a big deal.
Hmm.
That's a
Yeah.
huge deal for a lot of people. So, yeah, that's good. Yeah, so give some
So
hugs.
let me ask you. Yeah, 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 absolutely. So let me ask you a couple of questions about not misinformation, but demystifying yoga.
Okay.
So two things that I often hear people mention is, well, it's not a Christian practice,
Right.
and then the other thing is they just it's only it's an exercise and nothing
Right.
more. Are
Right.
either of those true?
No, not by any means. So I think a lot of times people are, well, for the second question, I think a lot of times people are drawn to yoga for the physicality of it. I think that, they see, oh, my body's going to be in better shape. I'm going to have more flexibility. It's going to be, this is a good benefit for me. And then they find out later that there's a lot more to it than just the physical practice. The physical practice is a big part of it, but there's a lot more to it. There's something called the 8 limbs of yoga that talks about your breath work practice, which is a huge part of it, and I'm sure we can chat about that later.
Hmm.
The um, Being in the physical practice, which is called asana, is like I said, where most people are drawn to it. But I think that they miss out on the last 3 limbs of yoga, which is about the spirituality part of it and the meditative part of it. And so, the mindfulness practice that we get into is, one of them's called singular focus, and then one of them's called the focus on the whole. And then the end of it is the end, and the last limb is the end result, which is supposed to be, it's called a number of things. It's called samadhi, but it's universal enlightenment and bliss, and enhancement, and all these different things that are the goal of all of this practice. And I think that the misnomer that it's you can't be Christian and do yoga, it went around a lot, and especially here in the South, I hear that sometimes. That's common with meditation and mindfulness practice as well. So I think that when you look at, part of the practice talks about your connection spiritually, and how you want to, if you're Christian, your spiritual connection to God. And if you're not Christian and you're in one of the other religions, it's still about your connection to God. And I think that's so super important, to have some kind of spirituality, because it's what drives us forward. It's what gives us hope for the future. It's what moves us along in our journey through life. And I think that it's super important to understand that yoga can become part of that practice for you as well. I get on my mat sometimes and I think to myself how wonderful the world is around me, and how special moments are in my life, and my connections to my spirituality. And I think that, you know, i- you can go to a yoga class that's based on the yoga practice and the Psalms, for instance, because there's so many different styles of yoga out there. Majority of the classes that you go into may mention spirituality, but it's going to be kind of a baseline for everything, so that it's encompassing for all people, not just one specific group or another. It's about making sure that it's accessible and it's acceptable to all groups. There was some concern at one point that I had personally about the culturalization of things. And I took a yoga class with one of my Indian friends. And she said, I'm not worried about you. And I was like, oh, I'm so flattered about teaching yoga. She said, you've done your homework and you understand where it comes from. And she said, I don't have any problem with you teaching yoga. She said, it's the connection that you have to your yoga practice is so important, and to be able to share that with other people and encourage them to do the same. One of the jokes in the yoga in the teacher training is, if you don't like your yoga teacher that you go and take your first class with, go find another yoga teacher. Don't give up on yoga, because they're all so different from so many different angles.
hmm
Um,
hmm
I don't know. Did I
You
answer the
know,
questions?
yeah, yeah. No, I think so because one of the things I've been thinking about lately, you mentioned samadhi,
Mhm.
and all of these words that it might be translated into. I think the the most common and simple word is just happiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
one of the things that the great wisdom teachers have always said is the one common thing of all human beings is that we all just want to be happy.
yeah. My quote line on my social media is, "Life's too short to be miserable." You know, I think that building happiness is a practice as well. Because I think we lose sight a lot of times of the things that make us truly happy, and we forget to be grateful, and we forget to be connected to those things. One of the biggest things for me was, for a while I kind of lost touch with my inner child, and that inner child is a source of creativity for me. And so when I started kind of exploring back out how to be connected to that, teaching kids was a great way to get in touch with that, because they humble you very quickly. And I think that,
Every
I,
mother knows that.
yeah, but I translated a lot of that into my teaching as well. I think that we forget that, making volcanoes with our hands, can be fun, and when you connect back to that, it does bring a level of happiness and a level of elation and a level of joy that we forget sometimes we have because we're in the doldrums of daily life. And so I think it's important to continue to keep connecting back to that, and especially through the sense of, life is still can still be about play, and play is good. And especially if play is part of your practice for yoga or Pilates or dance or whatever you do, you have to remember the things that bring you that kind of joy and that kind of happiness, and keep reconnecting with them. Because a lot of times I think we get
So,
disconnected.
so what do you think it is about yoga, dance, well, all of that, yoga, dance, music for you that brings you happiness? What do you think it is about it
For
that
me, I think it's I enjoy the movement. I really do connect to the movement. It makes me feel good. It brings me inner peace to move slowly and deliberately, which is my yoga and my Pilates practice. And then, of course, gets my heart racing when I'm doing some of the ballet stuff and some of the dance stuff. And that up and down feels good in my mind and my body. I think that the clarity that I have from doing those things makes me feel more connected to my mind and my body, in a sense that they come together. And because one of the laughing points in Pilates is that everything is about coordination. And people come in and they go, I'm not coordinated at all. And I said, it's a practice, and it will come. And it does, and it does, and I think the sense of accomplishment is really gratifying, and that makes you feel good too, because I think we lose that sometimes, especially, between all the anxiety that we have and the day-to-day things that we do, and we kinda get stuck on the treadmill sometimes and stuck in the hamster wheel, and, have to be able to jump out of the hamster wheel occasionally and risk falling.
Mhm. What you just said about the sense of self accomplishment. In meditation, a lot of people think that it's about quieting the mind, but really, the first benefit doesn't come from quieting the mind, which you can't do anyway. And most
Right,
people, it's noticing that your mind has wandered and then coming back to your breath. But it's really the beginning again
right,
that is where the healing occurs. And if you don't fall off the focus, if you don't lose focus and have your mind go crazy, you can't come back and begin again.
right,
And most people only focus on the failure, but they don't
right,
focus on the fact that they began again. And
right.
every time, and in one 10 or 12, 15-minute session, somebody might begin again 12 or 15 times. But what is important is not that they, quote, lost focus 15 times, it's that they began again
Right.
15 times. And in the brain, what that says is, I'm tough. It says, I can do this. It
Guess what
gives
that
me a
is?
sense of I can handle failure. I can tolerate discomfort. I am strong.
Mhm.
And you tell your brain, I am strong, I can begin again. You tell that to your brain 15 times today and 15 times tomorrow. Inside of a week or two, you start to think, hey, I'm pretty strong.
Guess what
So,
that is?
can
Showing
you
up.
showing up,
Showing
showing
up,
up. It
showing up,
is
showing up
do
over and
you
over and over again. Yeah.
can you think of an example or a story of a client that you had that came in absolutely convinced that this was not for them, couldn't do it, wouldn't do it, but just showed up? Is there anybody you can think of?
I do. I have a client that's like that, and, initially, I really thought she was gonna give up, and she kept saying, "Ah, I don't know," and she'd reschedule her appointments, and I said, "Look," I said, if you show up and for at least 2 months, I said, and you have to do it for 2 months because you have to make a habit out of it, right? That thing about showing up has to become a habit. And the way you make a habit is by repeating the same thing over and over again to create that habit. New habits create new pathways in your brain. And so it's a good thing to be able to continue to do something over and over and over again. And so I said, look, you show up consistently for 2 months, twice a week. And she was coming twice a week, which is a lot, when you're doing Pilates, because you do get sore sometimes. But, she showed up for 2 months and she's like, I love this. I want to get trained in it. And I was like, yeah, I told you. You have to just keep doing it. Keep doing it. And it's good. And now she's hooked and she's looking at potentially becoming a trainer. So I'm excited for her. It's tough though initially, especially when it's something that, you not necessarily dread doing, but there are days where you don't just feel like doing the things. And when you don't feel
Mhm.
like doing the things, it's that much harder to get motivated to do it. I think that I'm very lucky. I'm in a job that I love, and there are a lot of people who are not. And so, you have to do your job to make money so that you can live. And so that's the worst part of it, I suppose. But the best part of it is that you get to buy the things you want to buy because you did that, right? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
I think that yeah, just it really is about showing up and being in that space. And,
Yeah, my when I was 70 pounds heavier, Um, showing up was going to the gym was there are all kinds of things to not do it. At first, you're embarrassed, and everybody else is stronger, and
right,
there's this and there's that, and the whole social thing and the like. But my wife found a poem, and it was called "Choose Your Hard," and it starts out by saying, "Divorce is hard, marriage is hard. Choose your hard."
right.
You know,
Mhm.
being fat is hard. Going to the gym is hard. Choose your hard.
Right.
So nobody ever promised you that life was going to be easy.
No.
But there's some hards bring you happiness, and some hards bring you more suffering. So choose your hard, right?
Choose your heart. I love that. That's gonna be my quote today. That'll be the mantra for today. I love it. Choose your hard. I'm gonna tell that to some of my
Mhm.
clients. No, it's
So
good.
what stimulated? You started ballet when you were 8 years old, right?
Yeah, which is late for a ballerina.
Yeah.
Usually they start about age 3.
Wow, really?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because you're so flexible when you're a child, when you're a young child, that the practice, for ballet has to basically maintain that flexibility through the rest of your career. And so when you start a little bit older, you've already lost some of the initial flexibility. You know how babies bounce, right? That's always the joke, that babies bounce, but they're so super flexible because their bones haven't hardened. So as they move through their course of their life and they get a little bit older, the bones start to harden, your joints start to harden, in the shape that they're going to be for the rest of your life. So if you're not uh, already practicing, for instance, that 180-degree split that everybody does, your bones get to a point where they're not going to be able to make that shape anymore. So there becomes limitations. So I had to work a little bit harder than most of the kids around me to kind of catch up to where they were. But luckily I got in that early enough that it was good. It was good, and like I said, I took a year off here and there, and wasn't really dedicated through high school. But once I got out of high school and I found this company, I was so excited to be a part of it. And
Mm.
like I said, the director was from the Cuban National Ballet, and I miss her dearly because last I heard she was still teaching, and she's got to be in her 80s. So yeah, but I was fortunate too that I had Russian teachers, and not to say anything about American teachers, but the Russian teachers were tough. And so I think that was part of the discipline of it, was that the Russian teachers were, adamant about, this is how we conduct ourselves in the classroom. And I think it's a good discipline because it teaches you how to be disciplined in the class, and respect for the people who are older than you. And you go into class, you curtsy to the teacher, you go out of class, you curtsy to the teacher. I mean, there are things that a lot of times don't happen in all the non-Russian schools, but I appreciated the discipline aspect of it for sure.
So, you just mentioned flexibility
Mhm,
for a child, and it reminds me of, an old uh, adage that if you look at a twig
mhm,
and it's alive, it bends, but when
mhm.
it's dead, it breaks.
Yes,
And what is a message for us older guys? I mean, I'm 75, and I can feel some things stiffening up, but
sure,
um, is it? I mean, we always think of yoga as being tough. I mean, it's hard to hold a position in, like, but you
sure.
do something called restorative
Restorative
yoga.
yoga. Mhm.
Yeah,
It's
that
a very
sounds something like us old guys would like appreciate. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So we put you in a pose, but with a lot of props. So like bolsters, blankets, extra things that, blocks, things that you would need to help hold you in a position that gives you a space to reset your central nervous system. And so you end up holding the pose for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. um, and it is a yoga pose, but it's very supported. So, a lot of people's hips are in really bad shape as they age. And so this is a place to kind of find a little bit of opening in the hips, get a little more range of mobility in the hips, by doing some of these restorative poses. They're almost always laying down. So they're what we call supine, which is laying down. And like I said, they're always supported with a lot of props to make it as comfortable in the pose. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't a little bit of intensity, probably where the body is trying to open, but it's usually some soft music in the background, and you just kind of chill there. And if you need to move, you can change positions, and it's wonderful. Um, my husband used to lovingly call it the laying on your butt class. He said, "I don't know why people would like something like that." And I said, "Well, you might understand when you're older." So, but yeah, it's again, so many different styles of yoga. So restorative is great if you need to open the body and kind of settle down, reduce your anxiety, kind of work on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest nervous system,
Mhm.
versus we're always in the fight, flight, or freeze nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system, especially in today's climate. And we're looking at, how can I turn the dial down a little bit? And restorative yoga is a great way to do that.